Hello and welcome to Janette's TV podcast. I'm your host, Janette Burke. Today, I'm being joined by Aviva Rubin. She is a well-known Toronto writer who has now a debut novel called White. And she joins us today to talk about it. Welcome to Janette's TV podcast, Aviva Rubin. How are you today?
I'm great. Thank you so much for having me, Janette. I appreciate it.
You're welcome. Aviva, this book is a very interesting book, and I'll just give a little synopsis of it. It's essentially about a woman named Sarah Cartell, who is raised in a white supremacy type family. She begins to question all those beliefs because she befriends somebody in a sort of an unexpected way. And then the both of them get themselves involved in infiltrating a neo-Nazi group and trying to disband it, risking obviously their lives in the process. And certain things start to come out about her family, dark secrets that actually led her to almost to have a mental breakdown. And so the whole book, I guess the premise of it, it really does beg the question, can you change or become something different when you're raised in a legacy of hate? And so I'm going to pick it up from there and ask you, first of all, what led you to write about this theme, to the subject matter of the book, and what is your own personal experience with white supremacy?
I guess in some ways, those two questions are interconnected. During the book is set primarily, like the present of the book is the mid 90s. And that was a time when I was involved in a group that was doing a lot of anti-racist and anti-fascist activism. And there was a lot of white supremacist organizing, Ernst Zundel, the Heritage Front, across the country, but in Toronto especially, and we were trying to fight that. So I came to know a lot about what was going on about that at the time. I think that for some people it seemed fringe, but for others, like our group, but also like the Canadian Jewish Congress, like there were groups that were very concerned about what was going on with white supremacy in the country at that time. So that was sort of one of the drivers for the book. I also have a very close friend who infiltrated a white supremacist group in Montreal, and we had spoken about that work that she had done. It was not the same family legacy. Her family was not; those were not their beliefs. But she sort of felt like if I can pass in that way, I should be sort of doing this work to try to figure out what is going on in those hate groups. So I think the combination of those things kind of started these ideas percolating about what it would be like, in fact, to grow up in that kind of a family and then to try to change your views. And in a way, white supremacy is what the book is grounded in. It could be any kind of form of extremism or fundamentalism, when as the basis for the story.
Mm-hmm. So you touched upon a little bit. I'm going to ask you to delve a little bit deeper into how bad is white supremacy in Canada? How widespread is it? I mean, maybe we think as Canadians it's a bit more hidden than what we are aware of that exists in the United States, particularly in the US southern United States. But how is it in Canada as well?
I think that's a great question. And I think, first of all, I just wanted to point to this book. So Warren Kinsella, you might know Warren Kinsella. He wrote this book called Web of Hate in the 90s, and it was a comprehensive history of white supremacy, primarily in Canada, but it also touches very much on white supremacy in the United States. And it's very established here. There are all sorts of organizations, and there are organizations in the States that track like white nationalist organizations as well. I think what feels different now is that there is more of an acceptance of like if we of sort of the legitimacy of those beliefs as being like, well, anyone can be proud of themselves. You can be proud of yourself for being Black. You should be able to be proud of yourself for being white, like you're proud of yourself for being Jewish. But I mean, obviously it plays out very differently, but that sort of attitude now, and the permission that has been given in my opinion by I don't want to get too much into the politics of the United States, but there was a certain president that really opened up permission for those kinds of beliefs. And I think now the acceptance of that, of white supremacy, beyond just like the harshest, the sort of neo-Nazi kind of, those are the obvious white supremacists, but just generally believing that you are better than other people because you're white, and a fear of losing that that status or that position in society as the demographics shift in our countries. I think that partly informs what's going on with white supremacy and why it seems to be getting more and more popular.
Okay, so let's turn to the character of Sarah, who
Mm-hmm.
obviously is the main character in your book. The story is all about it. How does her story relate to her experiences too of white supremacy, and what does she want the world to recognize about white supremacy and the importance of
I
combating?
Yeah, like she, as you mentioned earlier on, she befriends a Black boy at her school, and with whom something more will happen a little bit later. Like they meet when they're quite young, and then she's very involved with, she loves reading and she loves her library. It's set in Goderich, Ontario, and the librarian is the one who really sort of like uh kind of digs into what Sarah's belief system, which she actually wholeheartedly still believes until she begins to have those conversations with Mrs. Broder, who's the librarian, and everything starts coming apart. And I think that she was starting to question some of these things. Her family have long believed those things. Her grandfather is like a real hardcore hater, and he's got the control over the family. And I think I would just to step away for one moment from the issue of white supremacy, like the novel deals a lot with what is called like intergenerational family trauma. So
Yes,
what
I
happens,
want to get into that too. So go ahead. You're
yeah.
jumping ahead a bit, but
Oh,
yes. So
sorry.
no, it's okay. It's okay. It's perfect timing. We'll get into it now. I had that question too about how the grandfather's beliefs and hatred infiltrate the family and how affected they are by them, but also how Sarah is specifically affected by them.
Yeah, and I think what happens obviously when you grow up in a family that has hateful or extremist beliefs of any kind, you and these are people that raised you, people that you love. I mean, there are very few people I think that cut themselves off completely from their family of origin. Some do because they have to for their own sanity. But in this case, it's the struggle for Sarah of loving these people and caring about them, like her father, her uncle, and yet hating everything that they believe in. And everybody in the book, like all of the family members, have been impacted by the grandfather's beliefs, like very dramatically. And the grandfather, I mean, I only allude to this, but the grandfather himself was also, those were the beliefs that he was taught. But as I've said before, it's like he's really the one not particularly redeemable character in the book. Like everybody else, the book deals so much with how you struggle with the imposition of those kinds of beliefs. And he's also like he's a bad guy. Like he is not a nice person. And so it's not only, there are people who have hateful beliefs and they're like, but they seem like such a nice person. They just like are very, whatever it happens to be, racist or homophobic, but he's actually really not. So that makes it a tiny bit easier because it's really hard to like him. But yeah, so there's trauma that goes down through the generations, and that's Sarah's struggle. And I think one of the themes of the book is that she's trying to change the world into something that she doesn't really believe she deserves. So because she was born into white supremacy and born into that belief system, somewhere she thinks that's a little bit in her blood, and that is there necessarily even a place for her in this world that she would, love to help, bring about.
So let's delve a little bit into that, because she does suffer a mental breakdown.
Mm-hmm.
I guess it's brought on by some of this questioning and maybe feelings of guilt or whatever. But what's it like for a person like Sarah to discover the truth and then find out that that truth is very opposite to the way she has been raised and taught to believe, to be brave enough to challenge that and come forward and make a difference or make an impact, even make her own decisions on some of the rhetoric that she grew up with, make her own opinions about that. What's that like for her? And what can we learn as individuals from her and her journey in the novel?
Well, I mean, I mean, there's so much to unpack in that question. I think that the massive transformation, the transformation that takes place over, like, the primary relationship in the novel is a therapeutic relationship. So Sarah goes into a mental healthcare facility and has a therapist, Mona, and she's very, very resistant initially. Like, I don't think she's very aware, even though she's aware that, this is a belief system that is awful and oppressive and hateful. She doesn't really understand at all the damage that it has caused to her to be brought up in that kind of a context, and what it means to actually care deeply about people that feel that way. So I think that one of the the trajectories of the book is how she comes to understand the damage that she herself has suffered. She chooses, throughout the book, to isolate herself often. And but without really realizing that that's going to cause her, that, that's going to be an emotional hardship. She doesn't really understand that. And the book, what happens at at the very beginning of the book, that there has been an incident, a violent incident that has involved a very close friend of Sarah's, and she considers that to be her fault. So that's really what triggers the whole spinning out. Like, she's able, like, up until then, and you only find this out, you find this out as the story moves on, to kind of manage the, living with all of those lies. She has her friends who are on the left, who are progressive, who are activists. She has her friends that are on the right, who are, have those white supremacist beliefs. And so she's constantly, the tension is that she feels like she's constantly lying in a lot of ways to everybody. So, I think that one of the messages of the book is that you can't, like, if you leave these things unexamined, like, they will cause, they can cause great suffering. And it's not that necessarily, like, every, therapy, every instance of therapy is going to, like, solve all the problems and now you're all better. But it just suggests that you have to examine these things. And she just fights that. She really fights. She doesn't really understand why that's a useful thing until she sort of does, I guess.
So I guess, but when you're raised with that kind of thinking, right, and you really have to challenge yourself to maybe see things from a different perspective, I'm just inviting you to comment that in life we encounter people like this every day, right? Are around us. We have a nucleus of different types of people with different types of ideologies and different types of upbringings. And there has to be a way to manage it all or balance it all out and yet still hold true to our own beliefs. Do you have any tip on how to do that?
Well, I'm neither a therapist nor like a psychologist, but I just to mention for a second, one of the people that read the book and blurbed it for me is named Arno Michaelis, and he was at the time that I was doing anti-fascist activism, he was a white supremacist and a huge bully, and and he was doing that from when he was a teen to when he was in his mid-20s and realized that he would either like die or end up in prison if he didn't change his life, and he started to transform his life. And one of the things that he says in his blurb is he talks about the power of meeting certain people in your life at certain moments that allow everything to change. So it's really very much about, connection and friendship and how that can transform everything. So I think that's a really important theme in the book. And I guess that would be my answer to the question broadly, is that if we close ourselves down from actually understanding what other people are experiencing, even if we find their way of expressing it to be really problematic, then we're going to deny ourselves any understanding and any possibility of a dialogue across difference. So I think I think that's part of where the book goes, and partly an answer, I think, to your question about how you actually resolve those huge tensions.
So as we uh, come towards the end of the interview, there's two things that I would like to do before we close out. And one of them is just my last question is basically, how do you see supremacy or white supremacy unfolding in the world today? And the second part of it would be, if we had respect and understanding towards each other, regardless of our views, would that not help to alleviate some of the tensions?
Well, I'll answer I guess the second question first. Like absolutely, like I feel that wholeheartedly. I don't feel that that's an easy task. I do feel that that gets almost done like one person at a time. I'm not sure the big speeches and pontificating about the way that things should be necessarily changes anyone's mind. And I think that we're witnessing that constantly. So I do feel that it's like reaching out and talking to somebody that has a different opinion. That's the only way we're going to have any kind of broad transformation, is kind of on a granular level. The question about where things are at right now, it feels pretty dire. And I think one of the problems, one of the things that replicates itself over and over again is that as soon as people are struggling, like whether like they're having an economically difficult time and, at post-COVID, like there are a lot of reasons why people are feeling really stressed and really anxious. And often in those times when things are hardest, people will look for somebody else to blame. And I think that's often what happens. So everything can be going along and something changes, something dramatically changes in the economy uh, or politically, and then people feel extremely stressed and they look to the other as who you can blame for why your situation is so difficult. And so in these times, it feels like there's just carte blanche permission for people to hold those feelings. And I do believe that they come often out of fear, like fear of losing things, not even things that you had, but things that you thought you should be entitled to just by virtue of who you are in the world.
Mm-hmm.
So it feels like a scary time in
Mm-hmm.
that.
But again, just getting back to the whole story and to Sarah's character, the willingness to be able to say, okay, these thoughts that I'm holding on to, are they really the truth? Are they really accurate? Can I open my mind and be willing to look at something else from a different lens, from another person's perspective? Can I see it from their, their interpretation of the facts too? Because, it's generational, as you said, right? So this happens a lot. Like, I mean, the rhetoric gets spread from one generation to the other. And often what happens is, instead of building some kind of bridge where we could be more open and receptive and respectful towards each other, we're automatically closed because we have that rhetoric in our mind and in our head, and we think that that's the way it is, and we're not willing to sort of look outside, right? Or do our own research. And I think that that's a dangerous game. I think we have to be more willing to be receptive to seeing things from both sides.
I completely agree. And I think that doesn't happen for most people by going to the library and doing your research. Like, it really happens often by some kind of a personal connection that you make that allows you to just like open a crack, of considering that maybe the things that you've, the belief systems that you've held on to are flawed.
Or maybe also a willingness to admit that you're wrong about something, which some people have a very difficult time doing.
That's
so
true.
I want to give you a chance to tell us where we can get the book. It's going to be out October 1st.
Yep.
If you could hold up to the lens an actual copy of the book.
I'm happy to do that.
Right? And where can we go to get the book?
So the official launch date is October 1st. And the book is available. It's available to pre-order at Amazon, Indigo, Barnes and Noble, and any indie bookstore, like the indie books, the networks of indie bookstores, and the indie bookstores themselves across the city. So yeah, that's where you can get the book. And it should, hopefully after October 1st, it'll actually be on tables in those books. Right now it's another story bookstore. Like that's where I know it's on a table, but hopefully it's going to be out all over the place after October 1st.
Okay, so, and don't worry, audience, we will share the links to all those things you mentioned below in the show notes so that you can go pre-order or go get yourself a copy of the book. And definitely, I recommend reading a book like this to really get you thinking about being a change catalyst like Sarah. And I want to thank Aviva for joining me today. And I want to thank my beautiful audience for being here today. Please remember to like, comment, and share all our posts with your family and friends. If you haven't already done so, please click the link below to subscribe to the channel. And remember that you can support us in one of two ways. We have the JTB t-shirts and sweatshirts, one with the logo and tagline, another with inspirational sayings made by me and a guest in a previous episode. Choice is yours. Order what you like, color, size, whatever. We ship everything to your front door. That link is below for more of that. And you can find us everywhere, all over the web. We are on Facebook, LinkedIn, Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, TikTok, YouTube, everywhere. That's on the TV side. On the MP3 podcast, radio, audio side, we are on iHeartRadio, Apple, Spotify, Buzzsprout, and that's a whole bunch more. So for a complete list of where to watch and listen to us, please check the link below. And until next time, continue to be fabulous. This is Janette Burke, your host, signing off.